Hey everybody, Brian Germain here, giving you a little tour of the Skydive VR system. So when you click on the icon, first you're going to get this initial screen, which has several different options, one of which is settings. And if you don't have a VR headset, you can still use Skydive VR. All you need to do is turn off VR support. Now I'm going to utilize it in this case. And there's also reference manual, DZ updates. So if greater detail is available for each of these drop zones, that's where you would update that. And then there's of course news, bulletins, and things like that. So I'm going to launch the program now. And so you can do it as the instructor or the student. So if you're doing a coaching session with me, obviously you'll do it as the student. I'm going to do it as the instructor here, and I'm going to do a local jump. So this would be as if I was doing work with a student in person on the drop zone. I can also do that remotely, which is absolutely amazing. So you got to hit the continue there. Look at all these possible drop zones that you can explore, and they're quite realistic. It's using the Google Earth imagery, and it's very, very impressive. So let's pick a nice drop zone to go to, maybe someplace we haven't been before. So let's go to I've never done a jump at Skydive Kentucky, so let's try that one. Set the gear. So in gear, you can start off where you're in the airplane, and you jump out in free fall, and you can get up as high as 15,000 feet. But just so you know, at this point anyway, you can't turn, you can't control anything. So personally, I don't like the feeling of not being able to control myself in free fall. So I set it on canopy. You can do a beginner canopy, which flies like a student parachute, more or less. And the Pro is about 15% faster in terms of airspeed and turn rate. You can also select military or civilian garb, so that's just what you look like, has nothing to do with what you're doing on the jump. And then, of course, you can exit at different altitudes. Personally, I usually stick with as high as possible, which is 5,000 feet. Now I'm going to set the winds. So here's the drop zone. So we can, let's just keep it simple on this one. I'm going to keep the wind running down the runway, and I'm going to do enough wind that you can kind of see what's going on and see the differences. And I'll put a little bit of ground wind in there too, 4 knots. So it's a nice jumping day here at Skydive Kentucky. And entry point, what is meant by that is the exit point, or where you're going to open. All right, so you can select also not only the location but also where you're pointed when you open. So let's do a little bit of a long spot. That way, if you have a cutaway, your free bag is likely to land on the drop zone. And I'm going to now click jump. So it takes a minute for the information to load. And when you first start up, I think it's good, especially if you haven't jumped at that particular drop zone, to kind of look around and get a sense of where you are. Now, I can see the airport off my right shoulder, and I can even see a little green dot, which is the target. I also have the capability on the screen to highlight the target. So we're going to go through some of the tools. I'm going to pause throughout the jump and show you what these different tools do. So let's get started. So I just squeeze both controllers, hands up, and just out of good habit, I unstow the toggles, let it up, and make sure that the parachute flares properly as I look in front of me, and I also look around to see if there's any traffic. I'm going to do a turn looking into the turn, right? So in case there's a parachute over there, parachute appears to be good. You can even see the pilot chute back there, kind of amazing. All right, so looking at my wrist, 4,600 feet, and the target is back there behind me. I'm going to face the target for a moment, sort of, kind of head in the direction of the wind. I'm going to run, and I'm going to pause things for a moment, and that's the 6 key. So I've left the the hotkeys here on the screen so you can see what they are. So as we're paused here, I'm going to switch on, first of all, ground position. That's very helpful. So if I look straight down, you can see where I am, and the arrow is obviously my ground track, where I'm moving to. And so you'll notice that if you're facing into the wind and it's really windy, you might find that you're going backwards, and that little bug will tell you where you're going. If you're crosswind, you might see that you're pointing the parachute in one direction and you're sliding across the ground in a different one. Very, very useful information, especially in VR, and even more so if you're using the desktop version, where you can't sort of look around and see the flow of motion quite as well as you would on a real jump, where if you sort of held your eyes still, you could see that point on the ground, that zone on the ground that's not moving. So that's very helpful. Another tool is the number 2 key. I'll turn the 2 back on. Number 1 key is where I would land if I continued on this heading and didn't make changes. See that green spot way on the horizon? Yeah, it's a windy day. So if I didn't do anything, I would land way past the airport. So people are always worried about, taking the spot too deep. And I always say, listen, if there's any wind, you don't have to worry about going too deep usually. It's much more about being too shallow or being off the wind line. So other tools that we have at our disposal, the theoretical runway. So that gives you an idea of, kind of the range of where you would be going if you just sort of headed in this direction. You've got, some latitude within that. I don't personally use it very much, but some people like that function. We also have the highlight the bullseye. Especially if you go to a drop zone where you can't figure out where it is, or the student gets a little confused in the VR, I could just utilize that key to point out the location. But it does look the same as the projected landing point, so I don't leave that on, so it's not confusing. Now the 3D grid doesn't look like much unless we're moving. So what I'm going to do now is turn on the time again, let things move forward, and you'll be able to see what this does. And hit the 6 key again to unpause. So now you can see where I'm going through the atmosphere. So in other words, if I was to flare, you can see the direction of motion changes. See that I'm kind of going level flight. And then I hands up again, and now I'm in a sort of descending mode. The other thing you might notice is that if I turn the parachute, now my landing point, if I was to continue sashaying, is closer to me. See that? And then lift my hands back up and point in that direction. Now it goes way over there. If I was to add brakes, watch what happens to that landing point. Now it's all the way to the horizon. It's like infinity almost. Now that's an exaggeration and it's imperfect, but it does get the idea across that when you add brakes, in a tailwind situation, you will extend the glide ratio across the ground. You're not really changing the glide ratio of the parachute in a pure sense. In other words, the true glide ratio doesn't really change very much unless you flare dynamically, right, where you do it quickly, and then it's going to change, of course, where you go through the atmosphere. So I'm going to turn off that 3D grid. I don't find that's very, very helpful. And the other tool that's interesting is I can rewind, and so it's in pause mode, and then I can rewind, go back up, and play out that part of the jump again. That can be kind of useful. The other thing that we didn't do initially on this one is the briefing drawing. So before the jump, the instructor can draw out the pattern on the ground, and they can bring that up periodically to sort of refresh the student's memory of the pattern that they should be flying. So that's kind of helpful. So let's let this run. 6 key allows time to unfold, and so what I'm going to do now is sort of play around with the heading. So I'm high enough now that I don't worry about crossing the runway. I'm now perpendicular to the runway in my heading of the parachute, but if you look at the ground track, I'm sliding to my right because the wind is off to my left side, and if I look up to my right, I'm going to land at that intersection of those 2 big roads, more or less. And if I was to add brakes and reduce airspeed, you're going to see that direction of motion change. See that? I'm sliding even more to my right, even deeper brakes, going further away and sliding more to my right. So now if I was to turn it around into the wind, right, so I'm going to, here, let's be polite to the pilots. I'm going to move away from the runway, even though I'm at 2,700. I think that's wise. Again, paying attention to where you are and where you're going and the relationship of brakes to direction of motion across the ground. Hands up, and now I'm going to face into the wind and note where the parachute would go to, right? Not nearly as far as the other direction. My range upwind is always not quite as far because of the reduced ground speed. Now I'm going to reduce airspeed even more, right? Reduce the parachute's ground speed, and you'll see that green mark getting closer. So this is where I would land if I didn't change anything and correct my heading just a little bit. And you can see that heading bug kind of twirling around as I play around with the heading because I'm not really moving. So this is a great tool on any skydive where you're not sure what the wind velocity is, because this way you can figure out how much brakes you need to achieve forward motion and then slowly adding more to the point where you stop moving across the ground. And that'll tell you how windy it is, because if you have to go to very deep brakes to make yourself move backwards or stop moving, well, then you know that there isn't that much wind. Whereas if you only need quarter brakes to achieve that straight down motion, well, then it's pretty darn windy. So at 1,800 feet, I'm going to head back towards the target. And since I've hung out so far for so long, to extend my glide ratio, you betcha, I'm going to go to the deep brakes and let the sky carry me. I haven't dramatically changed my true glide ratio, but what I did is increase the amount of time that I'm in the sky, and therefore the distance that I travel across the ground might be, it might be slower, but I'm going to go a lot further. So here, so you can see where that point is in the deep brakes, way out there on the horizon, the green point, and now I'm going to lift my hands up. Look at the difference. Do you see that? Right? So brakes is it's a very effective tool, but it is counterintuitive, right? Slowing down to go further doesn't make sense unless you take into account the fact that ground speed is a very significant thing. So I'm going to fly a left-hand traffic pattern, and I know that there is some wind, not a huge amount, but what I'm going to try to do is a 4-point pattern, 1,300, a little under 1,300. I'm going to cross the center line of my imaginary runway at about 1,200 feet, and I'm going to move my parachute's direction of motion to perpendicular across the ground. So I'm going to wait until I get to about 900 feet, and I even have an audible that beeps at 1,000, and then I'm going to slowly turn myself to downwind, and at 900 feet I've begun my downwind leg. Is that the perfect depth? I don't know, but it's pretty close, and at least this will put me more or less on the runway. And now I'm going to slowly, between 600 and 700 feet, turn myself to crosswind, and I have to turn a little more than 90 because there's wind, right? So I'm actually facing the target just a little bit. And now I'm going to, when I get down to about 300 feet, I'm going to add some brakes here so I stay near my center line. I'm going to slowly bring myself into final. Now I'm doing this in brakes because I actually probably should have gone a little bit further downwind, but adding brakes on the base leg and on the final approach can really help. So if it looks like I'm going to overshoot here, now that I'm 270 feet, I can always do a little bit of a look in sachet, right? Look in sachet. But landing on the target is not as important as landing safely with your parachute over your head. I'm going to make a little bit of corrections. Let it fly, and flare, 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 flare. It's not a landing simulator, so it's not perfect as far as that goes, but it's pretty good. There's the target 39 feet away. I didn't have to do anything too crazy, but keep in mind those little S-turns that I did are not something you would do if you've got traffic around. This was a solo hop and pop, so I'm not too worried about it. That's the kind of thing you might do if you're landing off the drop zone, so that you can keep yourself over that little backyard that you're trying to land in. Then here, let's show flight path. All right, so with show flight path, I can begin with the where I started off, and you can see where I went. And here's where I sort of ran, and then I kind of played around. I got over the end of the runway. I felt sort of rude being off the end of the runway, so I crabbed myself off of the runway heading, even though I was at about 2,700 feet or something. My mistake, no, that was about 2,600 feet. And that's where I sort of turned around and ran at about 1,700. It was wonderful. So you can really see what's going on. And then when I got myself back towards the target, and I turned my crosswind leg, downwind, base leg, and final, a nice boxy kind of an approach. And you can even see those little S-turns that I made to prevent myself from overshooting the target very much. So, yeah, fascinating, right? So this was a lot of fun for me. I hope that you guys explore this SkydiVR system. It is absolutely astounding. The data has been incorporated from FlySight information, so the flight path is going to be pretty darn similar to what you would expect, and the performance of the parachute is going to be similar enough that you're going to be able to really benefit from this. All right, I think it's great. Everybody should check this stuff out, and I think that every single drop zone should have one of these systems online. This is a game changer. All right, thanks for joining. I'm Brian Germain. It's been fun. All right, doing a jump in the clouds in Norway. Be a little chilly, but it should be fun. GPS is 1 mile away. And there's the door. I'm going to take a look. Because it's a little windy, I'm going to wait until we pass the airport. Okay. Oh, I love sitting in the door of an airplane. Okay. There we go. Woohoo! Yahoo! Nice opening. So I'm turning my parachute crosswind so that I can get away from the meat bombs. Whoops! I bumped my camera. No rushing. That's the trick. Okay, well, we got a cloud. I'm gonna go to the cloud because it's legal in Norway. Yahoo! I love it. Yahoo! It's so much fun. Yeah, the last jump was really turbulent, and this time it's nice. Yeah. So if you don't know what the winds are doing, turn into what you think the winds are doing. And then, in terms of direction, look at the ground. And then slow it down. Put the brakes on. And see if you can stop yourself. And if it's really windy, you might even go backwards. It's not that windy. Because it's cold, I've got to clear my visor every once in a while. Somebody's flying the reserve parachutes, not their main. That's interesting. Oh. Wow, that's so pretty. One more clearing. Okay, altitude is 2,000 feet. Oh, it's so much fun to fly my parachute. Okay. 1-3. And now downwind leg. And on the base leg. Brake. Surging double front risers. And now I'm going to carve my way in, steepening. And now shallowing with the rear risers. Woohoo! Bumpy landing area. Oh, that was super cool. Really, such a beautiful view. I wonder what happened with that reserve ride. Always interesting to hear what happened. I'm looking for the main. I see it. Oh, good. The main and the free bag are looking really good to land close to the drop zone. Probably line twists. Oh, see if I can film not only the landings, but if somebody's got a reserve ride, it's nice, especially with this kind of a camera, to film the landing of the main and the free bag, because then if we have a little trouble finding it, possibly, we get a better idea of where it is. I like the canopy trackers. I want one of those someday. Oop, in the trees. And there's the free bag. Also in the trees. Oh well. Well, let's see how my kids do. First one down is obviously the reserve. So let's see how she does on her, or he. I think it's a he. Yep. See how he does landing his reserve parachute. It's just a parachute. Same principles apply. Beautiful. Nice. Cool.
As long as you're having fun, well, do everything.
I can see laughter, or I can see tears. I see a choice, love or fear. What do you choose?